This is all of it on WNYC. I'm Allison Stewart. In the 1990s, critic Jerry Saltz raced across the city to see 25, sometimes 30 shows a week, made hundreds of studio visits, and still stayed up late into the night to write a review. Now he's looking back. You remember? Wow, I remember that. Now he's looking back on that electric era as part of New York Magazine's annual Yesteryear issue. Saltz guides us through a series of striking photographs he took, including Matthew Barney's debut, which he said was a show that made him lose his mind. A snapshot of young Tracy Emin curled up on a bed, and an image of Fran Lebowitz at a birthday party clapping with a cigarette hanging out of her mouth. In the piece, he revisits a moment when German painter and sculptor Anselm Selfer filled the Marion Goodman Gallery with 300 works of art staged like a funeral pyre. The piece is titled Jerry Saltz's 90s Art World, part of New York Magazine's annual Yesteryear issue, which is out now. It's the cover. And Jerry Saltz, New York Magazine's chief art critic, joins me now. It is nice to see you.
It's great to see you again, too, Allison.
Listeners, we want to hear your stories. What art shows were you going to in the 90s? Do you have a favorite art gallery or a museum? What pieces have you collected that still remind you of the decade? Our number is 212-433-9692, 212-433-WNYC. Give us a call. Join us on air. You start off the piece by saying, on May 1st, 1993, the 1980s officially ended. Why did you start that way?
Well, in 1990, I was 2 years old as an art critic. I had been a long-distance truck driver. I had never gone to school, no degrees, and I had to do something, and I thought I'll call myself an art critic. Very long story short, in the 1990s began with a serious recession. This was my big break because that flattened the playing field. But to skip to your question, the 1980s were bigfooting it all over. You had like white male painters, neo-expressionists. Women weren't really allowed to paint. The women were all like reinventing photography, like Cindy Sherman, Nan Golden. And then you had the club kids like Keith Haring, etc., staying up late. The problem is this was a very limited art world. The short answer is, on that day, 1993, Anselm Kiefer, the German painter, had showed 300 of his own works, like you said, stuck in a big pile like a boat. All these collectors were fingering the paintings, trying to grab them. And I thought this seemed pretty weird because on the wall was written the expression in German, 20 years of loneliness. And I thought, how could the most famous artist on earth be lonely or in solitude? That night, there was a dinner for Anselm Kiefer that made me know that it was over. It had white sand in this huge floor of an industria. It was a loft on 12th Street in Greenwich. And there were like kabuki dancers, 2 white tables set. And they released us into the room all at once, and everybody was hysterical. We took our seats. You could hear the hum of the Lear jets outside, smell the money. The dancers were saying things like, "We're going to devour your flesh." And then finally, the main serving came on of pig tartare. And many of Kiefer's collectors were Jewish, and his work is often about the Holocaust. And I understood at that moment that Uptown was the last night of the Met's Ring cycle by Wagner. And right at that moment, at about midnight, I knew that Götterdämmerung, the Twilight of the Gods, was ending. And it hit me that that's what I had witnessed. And that is, in fact, what happened. And meanwhile, you had hundreds of new artists, scores of galleries, new collectors, all taking the stage, trying anything they could out of anything they had to make something work.
I was going to ask, what was left behind? If that was the end, when you opened the door to the next generation, what was there?
Well, nothing was there, and that's what made it exciting. It made even a loser like me who couldn't do anything. I was still driving trucks. I was still a limousine for a collector. It made us all feel like, yeah, I could do this. I began writing criticism. Meanwhile, people opened small galleries. They did exhibitions. Formally, it was a very radically experimental period. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the famous artists of the 1980s sort of were cut off on another island of success. That left all the rest of us. But the long story is this. The one I participated, the remaking of the art world in the 1990s, was the avant-garde that lost by succeeding so spectacularly. Everything that was tried, not everything, but many of the things that were tried worked. And they started growing, getting bigger, more expensive, busier, crazier, more artists, more people taking the stage.
What's a good example of that?
A good example would be, well, I'll do one artist in one gallery. You have in the form of galleries Larry Gagosian, a sort of one-man, 23 galleried space, kind of the Death Star, honey-scented tractor beam of money, fame, power, just having his vision of a global art world. Jeffrey Deitch had it. Thomas Krenz at the Guggenheim had it. In England, they were having it. That's on the gallery side. The first whiff of mega galleries were in the air. David Zwirner had just opened. Hauser was about to open. Pace Gallery was, trying to flex its muscles. On the artist side, on the other hand, you had the first work I saw in 1990 that summer was in a crappy group show in a gallery that closed, and a young artist named Matthew Barney. Barney, well, you all know him now, but no one knew him then. I saw video of this naked man climbing up and down, putting Vaseline into his body, and the back of my head caught on fire, Allison. I thought, I am seeing one of the futures. I asked my wife to come over, and I said, look at Roberta Smith, co-chief art critic of the New York Times. I said, what do you think of this? And she looked at it for a while and said, it's pretty male, if you ask me.
That's funny. Oh.
And so Barney became a mega, and he's returned to the art world of late.
He was my friend's roommate in college.
Is that?
When he came to New York, and we were like,
who was your roommate?
He works. I can't. Well, I shouldn't say.
God. Next time.
Next time.
I want all the insight.
We're talking to New York senior art critic Jerry Saltz, reflects on the 90s art scene as part of the magazine's annual Yesteryear issue. He is with me now to discuss the 90s and New York. Listeners, we want to hear your stories. Which art shows you're going to go? Did you see in the 90s? Did you have a favorite art gallery or a museum or an artist? Is there a piece that you still collect from the 90s? Who are artists whose careers you've kept up with? Our number is 212-433-9692, 212-433-WNYC. Now you have Tracy Emin, who's Dame Tracy Emin. She's about to have she had a show, I think, last year at the Tate. Mm-hmm. We talked about Matthew Barney. But if you looked back at that time, what words and phrases would individuals use as they spoke about the future of art? How were they talking about their future?
That's a good question. They were talking in terms of performance, activity, audiences, quote unquote, completing the work, much the way Duchamp and your two former guests talked about art. They were talking about smaller venues and smaller things out of everyday accessible materials, not normally the languages of art. You had Rick Tirvanijat, who an artist from Argentina and Thailand, who would simply make food for people. He would clear everything out of the galleries. You would go, you would sit, and he would feed you free pad thai. people would go there in great numbers just to look at each other. Their antennas might be twitching and rubbing each other, and you would have arguments. I met many of the people and players of the 1990s at his weird, indescribable, you had to be there events. There was Elizabeth Peyton, who had a show at the Chelsea Hotel, sponsored by Gavin Brown. You had to go in, ask for the key to room 828. You would go up there, and in a small room would be her exhibition. I know people that said they hung out there, they had sex there, they just hung. It was, and 90 people saw that show, Allison, and it was all it took. We learned that it wasn't in the it was in the future. Everybody could be famous to 15 people. And maybe those 15 people would be enough.
How did people find out about different art shows and different galleries? Now you go on Instagram and there's a line around the corner.
Yeah.
How did it travel?
Well, the art world was smaller then. It was no longer just New York. We were going global, but we weren't. Don't forget, this is the first inklings of the last twilight of the era of what I call white aesthetics. This means New York, while being global in terms of Europe, parts of South America, maybe Mexico City, etc., it still was not really global. And I don't think that even I have to be honest, I don't think I noticed. And that's my shortcoming. And that was that art world shortcoming. But nevertheless, New York was no longer the center. It was the Gramercy Park International Art Fair, 1993, where that cover picture of Tracy Emin in bed, I took that, was like the Woodstock of that moment. And it had that kind of sick, wonderful promise of the era. Eventually, the success grew, and it grew, and it grew. And art got expensive, spaces got huge. It wasn't bad so much as it was all the signs were there.
New York senior art critic Jerry Saltz is here to reflect on the 90s art scene as part of the magazine's annual Yesteryear issue. We'll have more after the break. This is all of it. You're listening to All of It on WNYC. I'm Allison Stewart. My guest is Jerry Saltz, New York senior art critic. We're discussing the 90s art scene. It's part of the magazine's annual Yesteryear issue. We got a great text here, Jerry. It says, I worked as an intern at Exit Art. We used to have these wonderful, wild openings. Once David Bowie came in, he purchased an artwork and his credit card was declined. He said he was too old to be embarrassed.
That's great. Well, this was the time, Allison, and I tried to write about that, where fame had not become what it is today. This sort of industry, this steel-coated thing that moves in great cocoons, that's corrosive. Of course it was, but the famous and normal people would often be in the same room at the exact same moment going, yo, how are you? Anyway, and I took some pictures of David Bowie, of Fran Lebowitz, of John Waters, all of these quote-unquote famous people who were known, but we were all known to one another then, so it didn't seem so special.
It's interesting because people have often talked about how down to earth your critiques are. Is that who you are? Is that your identity as an art critic? Is it?
I'm afraid it is, because like many of the audience, I didn't go to school. And I, too, feel like an imposter. I, too, am not sure that I belong. And I'm working as hard as I can. And being a weekly and now a daily art critic on Instagram and all these other
I love your Instagram, by the way.
Thank God. Thank God. Everybody follow me, please, at Jerry Saltz. It forces you, as you have to do in this moment, Allison. You can't, prepare for a month on tomorrow's interview. You're getting it an hour before. You have to trust yourself, become unafraid, know that you're going to embarrass yourself, and make it anyway, even if you make it bad. I have a motto, I call it, I'm not going to mess it up this time. And that's my motto.
At the time in the 90s, you lived with your wife, Roberta Smith, who's also an art critic, as you mentioned, in a fifth-floor rear studio on Avenue B.
Wow.
It was a different place back then. What was helpful for you living with a fellow art critic?
Well, Roberta made me an art critic when I once showed her my work very early when I first was the senior art critic for the Village Voice. I let her read the first few pieces, and she said to me, if you don't get better, I'm going to kill myself. And I thought, I've got to save her life. Oh, my God. I thought I was doing great. And she is very, very, very rigorous and demanding. And I would say that she's taught me everything and that I've taught her nothing. And that's okay. We take care of each other. We love each other. And they've made a documentary about that, too.
Dave Hickey was a fellow critic of yours?
Yes.
What was unique about the way Dave's mind worked?
Well, first of all, I'll tell a personal story about Dave. He used to call me up from Las Vegas. That's where he was the ruling czar, a writer of beautiful prose, philosophical, a critic. He wasn't negative about art, I would add, though. He was afraid of being negative to artists or to galleries in particular. But he used to call me, and I'm going to try to do his Texas accent. He'd go, Jerry, you know that I'm a much better writer than you are. You should never have won that Pulitzer Prize. And I would say, you're absolutely right, Dave. Roberta should have gotten it. But he would speak in these weird rhymes and gnomic expressions, and I loved listening to him.
Let's take a call. This is Edith calling from the Upper West Side. Hi, Edith. Thanks for taking the time to call. All of it. You're on the air.
Yes, hi. I always call towards the end, so I'll make it quick. First of all, it's a great segment, and your guest is so engaging. I didn't hear it from the beginning, so I didn't get his name, unfortunately.
Jerry Saltz. Follow him on Instagram as he wants you to.
Please.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I used to go to those art openings that they had, the free ones, on I think it was Saturdays in Soho. The galleries would have a art opening, and I always had adventures because people would start talking to each other. Like one time I went, and I was invited afterwards to a poetry reading. And then another time I went, I was invited to the village, to the Greenwich Village, and for dinner. And another time I was invited to a Greek wedding reception.
Well, excellent.
That's absolutely God. That is the description for everyone. You go to your opening, I go to mine. We're having two different openings. Both, however, to this day, by the way, they're very open. You have to get over your embarrassment.
Oh, just go.
Just go.
Just go.
Where everybody is equally bashful. Everyone is nervous as soon as they leave their apartments. So you're going to be invited. Just say yes. I now just say no, but I feel that I've earned that.
You describe a gentleman who was the artist who drove Giuliani nuts. Who are we talking about?
We're talking about the great painter, Chris O'Feely. O'Feely was in the 1999 Sensation show where he showed his famous painting, The Holy Virgin Mary. A black Madonna is simply too much for certain people to take. Giuliani then got his shorts in a wad, said, I'm going to defund the museums. I knew Saatchi, the owner of the work then, and that morning I said, well, maybe swap it out for another. I chickened out, where Saatchi kept the work in. There's a photograph in my piece that I saw of the young Chris O'Feely painting outside at night at Gavin Brown's gallery on West Broome Street. Artists were just working on whatever they could then. And I want to say one more thing about Chris O'Feely. He did something that is almost impossible to do. After you become the center of a huge controversy, what will you do with your work? And O'Feely was able to come through it and invent and reinvent himself. He's one of the greatest painters around.
How much did politics shape the work of artists in the 90s?
I think everybody was political, but not as topical. I think that, that's a difference. I think that left-wingism and radicalism and liberal causes, that was, frankly, the politics of the 1990s. Yes, AIDS was decimating the community. Women, artists of color, all of that was in the work, but it was not, frankly, the primary, almost singular focus of much art that we see today. It wasn't based solely in subject matter. It was based in subject matter, materials, environment, the whole ball of wax.
When you saw all these photos that you took in the 90s, what kind of memories came back for you?
Wow. That's such a big question. I know we only have a minute, but I'll say,
We got 4.
First of all, I thought, what a terrible photographer. What an awful photographer. But then I realized that marked my position as a wannabe outsider. All my photos, I never really knew anyone. And I am very shy, and I would talk to you, and then I would run away. And I never got a good shot of you, for example, or whoever. I had memories that I had forgotten of people that have died, people that I thought were going to be big, that no one was interested in. But all of these people, Allison, had something beautiful, something that I feel that we have now, which is a life lived in art. And that, to me, is a definition of success. Of course, we all need to make money. I'm 75. I'm still stuck in a full-time job, and I have to take lectures and go all over the world. Get me out of here. I've been desperately trying to train AI to write exactly like me.
It will not happen.
It's got to take over, and I can't get it to work. I can only get it to write 2 great sentences at the top that sound vaguely like me, but then it starts, repeating.
Come on, Jer. We know it's you. Come on.
Oh, God.
We've got one question for you. We've got a minute to answer. This text says, I wonder if Jerry could comment on what he thinks the role of an art critic is in today's society and how it's changed since the 90s. You've got a minute and 10 seconds. Go.
Simply, this is an important question because the purposes of criticism have changed significantly. When I was writing criticism then, it was about, I thought you'd have to be pretty good to get past me. And I'm going to tell you what I like and what I don't like, why not, how it fits, blah, blah, blah. Today, I think criticism is much more in support of, to explain, to be an apologist, to be a promoter for the work. And to me, that's problematic as a geezer critic, but I absolutely understand it. I don't question those people, but I miss a certain juice that was in there. But the minute you say that to those critics, you're going to be called out. So in a way, it's another self-perpetuating system, and I sometimes pay the price. But it's a great and important question.
Jerry Saltz is New York Magazine's chief art critic. The piece he wrote is titled Jerry Saltz's 90s Art World. It's part of New York Magazine's annual Yesteryear issue, which is out now. Thank you for coming to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
There's more, all of it on the way, right after the news.